Do you really think this seat is yours? Emily Stone's words sliced through the polished boardroom, sharp and dripping with confidence as she planted herself in the CEO's chair, her heels clicking against the glossy hardwood floor. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, harsh shadows across the room, illuminating the rows of anxious faces in crisp business suits. Every eye was on the confrontation, a tense silence settling like a thick fog over the space, punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant rumble of traffic far below. Marcus Johnson stood in the doorway, calm but deliberate, his tailored navy suit flawless against his tall frame, hands folded at his front as he surveyed the scene. The receptionist, a young woman with a clipboard, blinked rapidly, unsure whether to intervene, her gaze flicking between Emily's triumphant smirk and the composed figure of Marcus. Emily leaned back, crossing her arms, the silk of her blouse catching the light as she leaned forward slightly, projecting authority she assumed she possessed, and a few murmurs of approval echoed quietly among the senior staff who had been caught off guard by her audacity. Marcus inhaled slowly, his eyes sweeping across the room, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the faint tightening of jaws, the hands unconsciously clutching pens as if bracing for impact. He stepped forward, the soft thud of his polished dress shoes against the floor measured and deliberate, each step commanding presence without aggression. Emily's gaze flicked toward him, her smirk faltering just enough to hint at curiosity beneath her confident veneer. Marcus stopped a few feet away from the chair, letting the tension build, letting the boardroom absorb the unspoken authority in his posture. The overhead lights reflected off the chrome accents of the conference table, dancing across the sleek surface, emphasizing the contrast between Emily's assumed dominance and the quiet, grounded power Marcus exuded. He tilted his head slightly, acknowledging the people gathered, letting a brief silence stretch between them, a pause that felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Emily shifted uneasily, feeling the weight of expectation turn inward as Marcus's calm, deliberate gaze met hers, and for the first time, the certainty she carried seemed to waver. The city skyline shimmered beyond the glass, 1,000 reflections of ambition and control, but inside this room, the rules felt suspended, fragile, as if a single word could tip the balance entirely. Marcus's hand brushed lightly against the back of a chair as he approached, not touching Emily, just letting the proximity signal intention, measured and deliberate, a prelude to revelation. Each staff member remained still, their breathing faintly audible, creating a rhythm that pulsed against the tension like the heartbeat of the room itself. Emily opened her mouth to speak, then paused, sensing the shift, the subtle gravity of a presence she hadn't anticipated, a quiet command that didn't shout, yet demanded attention. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and steady, carrying easily through the boardroom. "This seat isn't yours." The words landed like a soft hammer, precise and undeniable, causing a flicker across Emily's expression, a hesitation she hadn't allowed herself to feel all morning. The murmur of movement in the room stilled completely, the sunlight glinting off the glossy surfaces now highlighting not just the opulence of the space, but the stark contrast of true authority quietly asserting itself. Every eye followed Marcus, every thought momentarily suspended as the implications began to ripple outward, a tension so tangible it could almost be felt against the skin. Emily's hand clenched slightly at the armrest of the chair, her composure teetering on the edge as Marcus's gaze swept past her, settling on the documents meticulously arranged on the table, a subtle hint of preparation, of knowledge, of readiness that neither arrogance nor wealth could conceal. The hum of the city below felt distant, muted by the intensity of the moment, the polished marble reflecting the anxiety and anticipation as the boardroom collectively realized the shift in power was imminent. Marcus inhaled again, the subtle rise and fall of his chest a silent signal of control, measured and deliberate, each fraction of a second drawing out the tension, magnifying the inevitability of the revelation to come. Emily's smirk faded completely, replaced by the faintest trace of uncertainty, and the air seemed to thicken, saturated with the quiet expectation of a truth about to emerge that none in the room could ignore. The boardroom remained frozen, a collective pause stretching the seconds into an eternity as Marcus Johnson adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate slowness, his calm demeanor radiating quiet authority that contrasted sharply with the tension in Emily Stone's shoulders. Light from the morning sun continued to scatter across the polished oak table, highlighting the minute tremble of a pen in one of the junior analyst's hands and the subtle tightening of jaws among the senior staff. The faint scent of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the crisp aroma of freshly printed reports, grounding the room in its corporate reality while the social dynamics quietly shifted. Emily shifted her weight, heels tapping lightly against the floor in a nervous rhythm, her fingers brushing against the armrest of the chair as if to anchor herself. Yet her eyes betrayed the first glimmer of uncertainty. Marcus stepped closer to the table, each movement measured, his shoes whispering against the floor, commanding attention not through volume, but through the sheer presence he projected. He paused before the center, letting the moment extend, allowing every subtle gesture. The tilt of his head, the narrowing of his eyes, the faint exhale that barely disturbed the air, to convey a quiet confidence that demanded acknowledgement without a single raised voice. Staff members exchanged glances, their movements tentative, caught between professional decorum and the compelling gravity of the unspoken challenge unfolding before them. Emily opened her mouth to speak, hesitated, and then faltered as Marcus's gaze swept over the documents neatly stacked on the table, each page a testament to meticulous preparation, underscoring that authority was not claimed by volume or posture alone, but proven by knowledge and control. The subtle reflections of light on the chrome trim of the conference table mirrored the tension, the interplay of shadows emphasizing the contrast between assumed dominance and authentic command. A few of the younger associates shifted in their seats, whispering in hushed tones that were swallowed by the oppressive quiet, as if the room itself was aware of the pivot in power, recognizing that the outcome of this moment would set the tone for the remainder of the day. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line, her previous confidence waning in the face of Marcus's composed insistence, the air around her charged with the realization that her assumptions of control had been premature. Marcus reached for a glass of water, his movements deliberate, the soft clink of the glass against the marble coaster breaking the silence just enough to punctuate the tension, yet without disturbing the overall atmosphere. He looked around the room, making brief, deliberate eye contact with each participant, silently reaffirming the gravity of his presence. And the subtle nods and shifts from the staff reflected the recognition of a new dynamic, a reassessment of who truly held authority. Emily's hand hovered over the table as if to reclaim her perceived dominance. Yet each microsecond of hesitation revealed the growing acknowledgement that this was no longer a simple assertion of will. It was an incontrovertible presentation of competence and rightful position. Marcus adjusted his stance, straightening his back, the motion almost imperceptible, yet conveying a confidence that filled the room, compelling those present to align their perceptions with the reality he represented. The sunlight caught his eyes as he looked directly at Emily, steady and unwavering, and in that silent exchange, the balance of power crystallized, not through confrontation, but through the undeniable clarity of presence, preparation, and unwavering calm. Each staff member's subtle body language, the slight lean forward, the held breaths, the small gestures of deference, was a testament to the silent acknowledgement that authority had shifted, that the room's attention and respect were now centered unequivocally on Marcus Johnson, whose quiet insistence spoke louder than any words could, leaving Emily to grapple with the first tangible acknowledgement of the truth she had yet to fully comprehend. Marcus Johnson moved closer to the center of the boardroom, the subtle shift of his weight on polished leather soles sending a quiet signal of intent, and every eye followed, the tension in the room palpable as the staff unconsciously leaned forward, their attention fixed entirely on the unfolding dynamic. Emily Stone's breath caught slightly, a faint rustle of fabric as her hand brushed against the edge of the table, and the confident facade she had maintained all morning began to falter under the unspoken authority radiating from Marcus. He reached for the neatly stacked folders, his fingers hovering above the topmost sheet with deliberate care, the soft sound of paper shifting resonating through the silent space, emphasizing the gravity of his presence. Each person present felt the change, the subtle acknowledgement that control was not a matter of appearance or volume, but of preparation, clarity, and unshakable composure. Marcus's gaze swept across the room, noting the smallest gestures, the slight tightening of a jaw, the shallow intake of breath, the quick glance exchanged between two associates, all subconscious reactions to a shift in the equilibrium that had governed the room until now. Emily's posture stiffened, her smile waning, as she instinctively sought to reassert dominance. Yet every motion was measured against the calm steadiness of Marcus, highlighting the contrast between assumed authority and actual command. He tapped a pen lightly against the table, a rhythm so soft it was almost imperceptible, yet it drew the room's focus, a metronome for attention and a silent signal of the thoughtfulness underpinning his authority. The afternoon sunlight poured in at a sharper angle, casting long reflections across the marble floor, catching the chrome edges of laptops and the fine lines of documents, each glint amplifying the meticulous order Marcus maintained and the subtle disarray of Emily's earlier assumptions. Marcus spoke, his voice low, controlled, carrying across the room without need for volume. Let us review the details together. And in that phrase, the weight of competence and ownership was unmistakable, drawing the room into a shared acknowledgement of who truly commanded the space. Emily shifted again, attempting to respond, but her words stalled, the rhythm of her previous certainty disrupted by the clarity and authority in Marcus's tone and posture. Staff members exchanged small, almost imperceptible nods, their alignment quietly adjusting as the subtle choreography of recognition unfolded, a silent consensus forming around the undeniable presence of the true leader. Marcus lifted the top folder, sliding it open with measured care, revealing the meticulously organized contracts and internal memos, the depth of knowledge and foresight evident in every page, reinforcing the invisible yet powerful assertion of ownership and control. The boardroom, bathed in natural light and punctuated by soft reflections from polished surfaces, seemed to expand and contract with the silent tension, each participant acutely aware that the balance of influence had shifted, that the unspoken truth Marcus embodied could not be disputed or ignored. Emily's hand hovered briefly over a laptop, her gaze flicking between the documents and Marcus, uncertainty threading through her movements as she realized that performance, preparation, and clarity, rather than aggression or superficial dominance, dictated respect and recognition in this space. Marcus adjusted his stance slightly, a minimal gesture that conveyed confidence without ostentation, the quiet precision of his movements resonating more strongly than any raised voice could, reinforcing the equilibrium that had silently tipped in his favor. The sunlight caught his eyes as he scanned the room once more, and in that silent sweep, the acknowledgement of his authority settled over everyone present, subtle, complete, and unspoken, leaving Emily to process the first true measure of the challenge she had underestimated in the room itself, holding a collective breath in recognition of the undeniable shift. Emily's stone shifted slightly, her hands brushing the smooth surface of the conference table as if seeking some anchor, while her eyes tracked Marcus Johnson's measured movements. The afternoon light, softened now by a thin veil of clouds, filtered through the large windows, casting muted reflections across the polished table and the chrome edges of laptops, giving the room a subtle warmth despite the charged atmosphere. Marcus moved with a quiet precision, opening the second folder with a soft rustle that seemed louder than it should have been in the stillness of the room. Each page laid out meticulously to reveal charts, schedules, and memos that clearly demonstrated both his foresight and control over the company's operations. Every staff member was silent, their attention captured not by drama, but by the undeniable clarity of Marcus's competence, the way he handled the documents with an ease that projected authority without arrogance. Emily's gaze flicked from the documents to Marcus's calm expression, the tension in her shoulders gradually giving way to a thin line of realization that her earlier assumption of dominance had been premature. Marcus paused briefly, leaning slightly over the table, not to intimidate, but to draw attention to the details that no one else had yet grasped, the sunlight glinting off his watch catching the eye of the room and subtly reinforcing the quiet command he exerted. The murmur of the air conditioning and the faint hum of the city below were the only sounds, emphasizing the focus on the unfolding moment. The room itself seeming to hold its collective breath as Marcus highlighted each critical point with deliberate, unhurried clarity. Emily's posture, once confident and commanding, shifted incrementally as she absorbed the depth of preparation and knowledge Marcus brought to the space, her fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the chair, as if to steady herself against the growing awareness that influence was determined by substance rather than presence alone. The light continued to move across the room as the sun shifted, casting long, soft shadows that accentuated the contrast between the polished surfaces and the subtle human reactions within the room, the reflective floor and table surfaces mirroring the quiet intensity. Marcus looked up from the documents, making a slow sweep of eye contact with everyone in the room, each glance measured and precise, silently communicating assurance and prompting a shift in perception among the staff, who now began to adjust their posture and attention, aligning unconsciously with the undeniable authority Marcus projected. Emily opened her mouth, hesitated, and then let out a small, controlled exhale, the first audible acknowledgement of the changing dynamic, her previous certainty tempered by the recognition of Marcus's command over both the facts and the atmosphere. Marcus straightened fully, returning the folders to their neat stacks with the same quiet deliberation that had defined each of his movements, his stance radiating calm control, the faint creak of his polished shoes on the floor punctuating the finality of each deliberate action. The room seemed to contract around the subtle power shift, every participant aware of the pivot, recognizing in silence that respect and attention now followed Marcus's lead, the authority he embodied resonating without need for loud declarations. Emily's eyes flicked back to him, searching for a sign, any indication that her assumptions might still hold, and found none, only the steady assurance in his posture and expression, a quiet yet undeniable statement that command was not inherited or assumed, but earned through clarity, preparation, and presence. The ambient light caught the edges of the documents and the sheen of polished surfaces, a visual reminder of the meticulous order Marcus had brought into the space, reinforcing the quiet lesson that dominance without substance was ephemeral and that true influence was demonstrated in every precise, considered action. Leaving Emily to confront the reality she had underestimated as the room collectively absorbed the shift in balance, subtle, complete, and irrevocable. Marcus Johnson straightened, lifting his gaze from the neatly aligned folders to meet the room once more, his eyes calm but unwavering, projecting a quiet certainty that seemed to anchor the shifting energy in the space. The soft light from the large windows cast long shadows across the polished hardwood floor, highlighting the precise lines of the conference table and the reflective surfaces of silver pens and laptop screens, each glint catching the attention of the room, as if emphasizing the order Marcus brought to the unfolding moment. Emily Stone shifted slightly in her seat, the weight of uncertainty pressing subtly into her posture as her hands lightly tapped the armrest, the small sound, a rhythm against the silence that had settled like a tangible presence over the assembled staff. Marcus's fingers hovered over a single document, tracing the edge as he paused deliberately, allowing the room to absorb the significance of his action, the calmness of his movements a stark contrast to the nervous energy that had permeated the space just moments earlier. The staff remained quiet, leaning subtly forward in their seats, eyes tracking every measured gesture, the collective tension amplified by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of the city far below, reminding them of the world beyond the boardroom even as their focus was consumed entirely by the interaction unfolding before them. Marcus lifted his hand slowly, pointing to a key section of the document with a precise, deliberate motion, and his voice, calm and clear, carried effortlessly across the room. This section outlines the ownership clearly, and every detail supports our position. His tone was confident without aggression, measured without condescension, and it drew an almost imperceptible shift in Emily's expression as she registered the authority behind his words. The sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces of the table, catching the edges of folders and the subtle shine of a laptop screen, creating a visual rhythm that mirrored the methodical clarity Marcus embodied, reinforcing the sense that preparation, knowledge, and composure were the true measures of command. Emily's eyes flicked from the documents to Marcus, searching for a flaw, any indication that she might reclaim control, but found only the quiet precision of someone who had anticipated every possible move, whose authority was rooted in undeniable competence rather than assumption or display. The room seemed to settle into a new rhythm, breaths held briefly, then released in tiny exhalations as the staff processed the clarity of the situation, recognizing the shift in focus and allegiance, the subtle yet undeniable acknowledgement that Marcus's presence dictated the pace and attention of the entire assembly. Marcus leaned back slightly, adjusting his stance just enough to convey a sense of completion in his demonstration without breaking the calm continuity of his authority, and the staff responded instinctively, the smallest nods and shifts of posture signaling acceptance of the reality they were now witnessing. Emily's hand rested for a moment on the edge of the table, her prior certainty tempered by the unfolding clarity, the soft rustle of her sleeve, a quiet contrast to the composed stillness of Marcus as he surveyed the room, every movement purposeful, deliberate, and measured to reinforce the truth of the authority he held. The light continued to shift gently with the passage of time, casting subtle reflections across the room that highlighted the interplay of concentration, acknowledgement, and the emergence of respect for the quiet force Marcus embodied, leaving Emily and the assembled staff to silently reconcile with the moment that had definitively altered the dynamics in the space. Marcus Johnson leaned slightly forward, his hands resting lightly on the polished surface of the table, letting the quiet weight of his presence fill the room, the subtle rhythm of his breathing matching the almost imperceptible pulse of anticipation among the staff. The afternoon sun had moved across the sky, casting angled streaks of light through the large windows that caught the edges of laptops, pens, and neatly stacked documents, glinting softly and drawing the eyes of the boardroom toward the precise order Marcus had established. Emily Stone's shoulders tensed as she realized that the control she had assumed was no longer within her grasp, her hands tightening briefly on the armrest before releasing, a small concession to the undeniable composure Marcus displayed. The hum of the air conditioning and the distant city sounds seemed to fade, leaving only the measured presence of Marcus and the quiet attentiveness of everyone present. He picked up a pen with a deliberate motion, tapping it softly against the folder in front of him, the sound delicate yet commanding attention, signaling that he was about to guide the conversation with exacting precision. Each staff member shifted slightly, leaning forward without speaking, their eyes following the subtle gestures, reading the room and the authority it now reflected, as if the balance had silently shifted in favor of the one who had prepared, observed, and waited for the precise moment. Marcus's gaze moved steadily across the group, pausing briefly on Emily, whose smirk had faded into a thin line of realization, acknowledging, without words, that the foundation of influence relied not on assertion alone, but on knowledge, poise, and clarity. He gestured subtly toward the documents, indicating key points with a slight, fluid movement of his hand, and spoke in a calm, measured tone that resonated without rising above the quiet hum of the room. The details here reflect the structure and ownership clearly. Please review them carefully. His words, even in their restraint, carried weight, each syllable deliberate, each pause calculated, reinforcing the shift in attention from assumed authority to genuine expertise. Emily's eyes darted between the documents and Marcus, a subtle tension crossing her expression as she absorbed the certainty behind his calm delivery, the unspoken command of someone who had not merely claimed a position, but had demonstrated why it was rightfully his. The staff remained attentive, the light reflecting across the polished surfaces mirroring the growing clarity, every minor movement, from the tilt of a head to a shift in posture, speaking volumes about the evolving perception of authority within the room. Marcus placed the pen down gently and straightened, the movement fluid and deliberate, embodying calm control, his posture a quiet testament to preparation and command, and in that moment, the room absorbed the transformation, the subtle acknowledgement that influence and respect had quietly realigned. Emily Stone's gaze lingered for a moment on Marcus, her previous certainty tempered by observation, as the boardroom collectively settled into a new rhythm where attention, acknowledgement, and the subtle currents of authority now flowed clearly toward the figure who had quietly yet unmistakably claimed command through precision, presence, and unwavering composure. Emily Stone's expression tightened as she shifted in her seat, the subtle tension in her posture revealing the first signs of hesitation as she observed Marcus Johnson, whose calm, deliberate movements continued to dominate the room without a single raised voice. The sunlight from the large windows had softened further, casting long, diffused reflections across the polished conference table and the chrome edges of laptops, highlighting the meticulous order Marcus had established and the subtle contrast between composure and assumption. Marcus picked up a single folder, tilting it slightly to catch the light as he gestured to a highlighted section, his hand movement precise, controlled, and intentional, each gesture communicating clarity and command without the need for emphasis or theatrics. The staff remained silent, eyes following every subtle shift, the faintest rustle of paper punctuating the thick air with measured significance, underscoring the attention given to every deliberate action Marcus took. Emily's hands hovered momentarily over the edge of the table, a barely perceptible tremor revealing the internal acknowledgement of her misjudgment, the quiet realization that control and authority were grounded not in audacity, but in preparation, knowledge, and presence. Marcus looked up from the document, making slow, deliberate eye contact with each participant, the unspoken communication of assurance and quiet dominance flowing outward, creating an atmosphere where attention was drawn naturally toward competence and credibility. The gentle hum of the air conditioning mingled with the distant city noise far below, emphasizing the stillness of the room, the collective anticipation suspended in the soft ambient light that reflected off polished surfaces, casting subtle highlights across pens, folders, and the edge of the table. Marcus set the folder down with deliberate care, the soft sound echoing faintly across the room, signaling the completion of a precise action, yet leaving the authority he projected fully intact and undeniable. Emily's gaze flicked between the documents and Marcus, her lips pressing into a thin line, acknowledging without words that the balance of influence had shifted and that the quiet, meticulous assertion of command was beyond challenge at this moment. The staff members' subtle adjustments, the slight leaning forward, the small nods, the attentive posture, conveyed a silent acknowledgement of the shift, a recognition that the room had realigned around the presence of Marcus and the measured authority he embodied. The sunlight continued to filter in, casting soft, angled reflections that highlighted the contours of the room, the edges of the table, and the surfaces of the devices in front of each participant, accentuating the contrast between assumed dominance and proven leadership. Marcus's posture remained steady, composed, and deliberate, a visual testament to the clarity and preparation he had brought into the space, reinforcing the quiet yet undeniable command he held, leaving Emily to process the moment, her prior confidence tempered by the tangible presence of authority and competence that now governed the room. In the stillness, every subtle gesture, every controlled breath, every carefully considered movement contributed to the understanding that influence was not claimed by force or projection but earned through calm, measured mastery, and the room responded in kind, its collective attention fully aligned with the individual whose preparation, clarity, and presence had proven incontestably decisive. Marcus Johnson took a slow breath, letting the calm weight of his presence settle over the room like a steadying force, his eyes scanning each participant with quiet assurance that drew every glance toward him without a word. The soft afternoon light had shifted, casting muted golden streaks across the polished conference table and the reflective surfaces of laptops and pens, creating a subtle rhythm of light that emphasized both the order Marcus brought and the tension that still lingered. Emily Stone's hands hovered briefly over the edge of the table, her previous confidence replaced by a restrained curiosity, her posture slightly forward as if leaning into the realization of the shift in authority. Marcus's movements remained deliberate and measured, each gesture purposeful. He lifted a pen with precision, tapping lightly against the folder in front of him, and the sound resonated through the quiet space, drawing subtle attention to the deliberate pacing of his actions. The staff remained attentive, their body language adjusting imperceptibly, leaning slightly forward, eyes tracking Marcus's every motion as they absorbed the clarity of command, the methodical demonstration of preparation and knowledge that defined his presence. Emily's gaze darted between the documents and Marcus, her lips pressing into a thin line as she weighed the situation, recognizing the subtle power dynamic that had quietly shifted in favor of methodical competence over assumed dominance. The hum of the air conditioning mingled with the faint city sounds far below, emphasizing the focus and stillness in the room. The gentle interplay of light and reflection on the polished surfaces highlighting the precision Marcus projected. He placed the pen down with care, straightening his stance just enough to convey readiness and authority without drawing attention to himself, each small adjustment reinforcing the perception of measured control. Marcus lifted his gaze again, sweeping slowly across the room, letting his calm, deliberate eye contact establish a rhythm of attention that drew the staff into alignment with the subtle, yet undeniable shift in influence. Emily's eyes lingered on him, a subtle acknowledgement of the realization that competence, preparation, and poise, rather than assertiveness or boldness alone, were the true measures of respect and authority within this room. Marcus then reached toward a neatly organized stack of reports, gesturing with a slight, controlled motion to indicate specific points, and spoke in a low, steady voice that carried naturally throughout the space, each word deliberate and clear. These details outline the structure and priorities, reflecting both responsibility and accountability. The cadence of his tone, measured and precise, emphasized substance over spectacle, compelling attention and reinforcing the emerging understanding among the staff that authority was earned through preparation, focus, and clarity. Emily's posture shifted subtly as she absorbed the depth of Marcus's calm demonstration, her hands resting lightly on the table, fingers tracing the polished edge, and the quiet acknowledgement that the dynamics had changed was reflected in the slight adjustments of the staff around her, the unspoken consensus settling like a gentle weight across the room. The sunlight continued to move slowly, creating long reflections that danced across the surfaces, accentuating the contrast between previous assumptions of dominance and the methodical, quiet assertion of competence that Marcus embodied, leaving the room in a state of attentive stillness, fully aligned with the presence and measured authority of the figure whose preparation and poise had definitively shaped the moment. Marcus Johnson finally leaned back slightly in his chair, the subtle shift radiating calm authority as he allowed the room a moment to settle into the new dynamic, the polished surface of the conference table reflecting the soft golden streaks of late afternoon sunlight that angled through the tall windows. Emily Stone's expression softened for the briefest instant, a flicker of acknowledgement passing across her features as she absorbed the clarity and precision with which Marcus had conducted himself, the realization dawning that influence and respect were earned through preparation and composure rather than assertion alone. The staff remained attentive, each small movement, a slight lean forward, a careful repositioning in the chair, a gentle nod, reflecting the silent acknowledgement of the shift, the unspoken agreement that the authority now resided with Marcus, whose presence alone commanded attention and focus. The subtle hum of the air conditioning blended with the distant city sounds far below, creating a muted backdrop that accentuated the stillness and concentration in the room. The gentle interplay of light and reflection emphasizing both the opulence of the space and the measured control Marcus projected. He opened his hands briefly, palms visible, signaling transparency and steadiness, the small gesture reinforcing the quiet confidence that underpinned his authority, a contrast to the earlier tension and assumed dominance that had filled the space. Emily's hands rested lightly on the table, her posture straightening as she absorbed the message in Marcus's calm, deliberate presence, each micro-expression of hers reflecting the subtle acknowledgement that the balance had shifted and that leadership was being demonstrated through action, preparation, and clarity rather than claim or bravado. Marcus picked up a single folder, sliding it open with deliberate care, the rustle of paper a gentle punctuation in the still room, and pointed to a specific section with a slow, controlled motion, his voice low and measured as he said, "The framework here outlines responsibility and ownership clearly. Each detail has been reviewed, and the conclusions follow from careful analysis." The cadence of his tone, deliberate and unhurried, carried authority without aggression, compelling attention naturally, each word reinforcing the substance behind his presence and the shift in perception among everyone present. Emily's eyes lingered on him, a subtle shift of recognition in her gaze as she processed the quiet but undeniable command Marcus embodied, the calculated calm that spoke louder than any forceful assertion could. The room absorbed the stillness, the attention subtly aligning with the clarity and methodical precision Marcus displayed, every participant acutely aware of the transition and influence, the nuanced understanding that true command had been demonstrated through meticulous preparation, poise, and unwavering presence. The sunlight moved slowly across the polished surfaces, creating soft reflections that accentuated the meticulous order of documents, the gleam of pens, and the sleek lines of laptops, emphasizing the contrast between assumed authority and demonstrated leadership. Marcus's posture remained steady, composed, and deliberate, a silent testament to mastery and preparation, while Emily processed the moment with quiet acceptance, her previous assumptions tempered by the unmistakable evidence of capability, leaving the boardroom in a reflective silence where attention and respect had quietly realigned to the one who had proven it through precise, controlled, and thoughtful action. Experience the intense drama of corporate power in this Black Stories narrative where a confident executive and a determined businesswoman face off in a high-stakes boardroom. Follow the Black CEO as he asserts his authority with calm precision and unwavering composure, challenging the assumptions of the wealthy woman who underestimated his presence. Each moment in this Black Stories tale highlights the tension, subtle gestures, and quiet mastery that define true leadership while showcasing the reactions of staff witnessing the shift in power dynamics. The Black Stories unfold with cinematic pacing, capturing the sunlight reflections, polished surfaces, and meticulous attention to detail that frame every interaction between the authoritative Black CEO and the assertive woman attempting to dominate the room. In this Black Stories journey, the measured movements, deliberate gestures, and strategic presentation of facts demonstrate how influence and respect are earned through preparation and clarity rather than assumed control, leaving the boardroom in a reflective silence as every observer aligns with the calm authority of the Black CEO. Watch as the Black Stories reveal the nuanced exchange of presence and power, illustrating the subtle acknowledgement of competence over bravado in a tension-filled environment where every micro-expression and movement contributes to the evolving understanding between the Black CEO and the ambitious woman, cementing the narrative as a compelling example of Black Stories that emphasize intellect, poise, and earned respect. 1. A confident white woman in her early 30s wearing a tailored business suit, standing in a corporate boardroom with a polished conference table, full frontal view, subtle lighting reflecting on chrome and glass, realistic textures, no cartoon, professional hairstyle, poised expression, authoritative presence. 2. A composed Black man in his mid-30s wearing a navy-tailored business suit, standing confidently in a corporate boardroom with polished wood and glass surfaces, full frontal view, subtle natural lighting highlighting realistic textures, professional hairstyle, calm expression, authoritative presence, no cartoon. 1. A tense corporate boardroom at mid-afternoon, sunlight slanting through floor-to-ceiling windows, the polished conference table reflecting light across chrome laptop edges, the white woman standing assertively in her tailored business suit, the Black CEO facing her calmly in his navy suit, both poised in a silent standoff that radiates tension and authority, every staff member frozen mid-motion, expressions caught between curiosity and apprehension, subtle hand gestures, precise posture, a dynamic of power struggle as if the air itself is charged with anticipation. 2. The white woman in her apartment kitchen early morning, sunlight streaming through large windows, wearing a casual blazer and jeans, coffee mug in hand, hair slightly tousled, expression focused yet relaxed, city skyline visible through the glass, small plants and neatly organized shelves providing texture to her environment, hinting at her structured but busy daily life. Soft light highlighting natural skin tones and textures. Subtle reflections on counters, books, and coffee appliances. 3. The Black CEO in his minimalist loft living room, Mid-morning, standing by the window with a view of skyscrapers, dressed in a crisp white dress shirt and dark trousers, hands clasped behind his back, posture upright and thoughtful, ambient light casting soft shadows across hardwood floors, modern furniture, and a few personal items like framed awards subtly placed, hinting at a disciplined yet calm personal routine. The natural light illuminating his facial features and authoritative presence. 4. The boardroom again, later in the afternoon. The white woman gesturing sharply toward documents while the black so remains composed. A third figure slightly blurred in the background acting as the antagonist. The reflective table and polished surfaces catching light to emphasize tension, subtle expressions of disbelief and intrigue across the staff. Sunlight angled through windows casting long shadows. The composition highlighting the triangle of confrontation. Body language conveying silent strategy and control. 5. A rooftop terrace at golden hour. The black so standing near the edge with wind lightly tousling his shirt. The white woman nearby adjusting her blazer. The cityscape sprawling behind them. Papers scattered slightly on a nearby table as if mid-discussion. Expressions contemplative yet alert. Warm sunlight reflecting off glass surfaces. Soft shadows creating cinematic depth. Atmosphere charged with anticipation and unspoken resolution. 6. The boardroom at late afternoon. Sunlight softened into amber tones. The black so seated confidently at the head of the table, documents neatly arranged before him. The white woman standing slightly to the side with a composed acknowledgement, staff seated and attentive, expressions showing respect and realization, light reflecting softly across polished wood and chrome. Subtle shadows accentuating contours of the room and the poised figures, the moment capturing quiet authority, resolution, and the final alignment of power and respect between the two central figures.